I speak to Shaykh Zahir Mahmood, and he was mentioning to me that Guyana, from where he comes from, he was saying that he's got first cousins whose names is Michael and John. He was saying it would be no exaggeration to say that 80% of the youth have turned away from the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because the dawah was not proactive. The dawah was not proactive. And I know what you're going to say to me. You're going to say to me, well, Guyana, South America didn't have the big masjids that we had. It didn't have the big darul that we had. It didn't have the big scholars that we had. Let me tell you about a society who had bigger masjids than you, who had bigger darul than you, who had bigger masajid than you, and this was Muslim Spain. This was Muslim Spain. Qurtuba at the height of its flowering had over 600 masjid. And a couple of years back, we went to Qurtuba where there were 600 masjid. We found one masjid, and even that masjid was closed. Where there were 600 masjid, you would find only one masjid, and that masjid was closed. Why? Because these people forgot Allah, and Allah made them forget themselves. Qurtuba at Andalus, Spain, was built on the model of what? It was built on the model of Medina. And as long as it remained on the model of Medina, it thrived. But when these people's purpose became the dunya, then everything fell apart. What kind of scholars emanated from Qurtuba and the surrounding places? What kind of scholars? Do you know what kind of scholars? People like Ibn Abdul Barr, people like Ibn Hazm, people like Ibn Sina, people like Ibn Rushd. You know, these were pillars of Islamic learning. These were one of the greatest scholars in the history of Islam. But what happened? لا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم. Their progenies forgot Allah, and Allah made them forget themselves. The very same place which was modeled on Medina, when dunya became their purpose, then it all fell apart. And the narration mentioned that then each and every king became concerned about his own territory. And there was Abu Righal of their time. You know who Abu Righal is? Have you ever heard of a man called Abu Righal? Abu Righal was a guy, when the Christian king from Yemen, Abraha, came to destroy the Kaaba the year the Prophet ﷺ was born. He came past Taif, and in Taif there was a man called Abraha. And Abraha said, listen, if you give me some money, give me $1 and a dime, and I'll show you where the Kaaba is. When Abu Righal reached the outskirts of Makkah, he passed away. What the Arabs would do is that they would pelt his grave with stones. And they would say that this is a man who's ready to sell out his religion and his people for £1 and $1. And even until today, if you have a person of a deceptive nature, they'll say, Haza Abu Righal. This is Abu Righal. And these were the Abu Righals of their time. They were ready to sell out their own Muslim people, Muslim brothers, for their own kursi. And one place after the other fell in Muslim Spain, until all of Spain fell besides Granada. And Granada remained in the hands of the Muslims for 50 years after the rest of Spain fell. Until Abu Muhammad, he drew a treaty with the Christians on the condition that they would not force the Muslims to convert, that they would leave the Muslims on their post. And when the Christians came in, they reneged on their promise, and they went into the Alhambra Palace. Has anybody seen the Alhambra Palace? Really, when you look at the Alhambra Palace, you know, the eyes marvel at the architecture and artistry there. It's an amazing place. And all through the Alhambra Palace, you have La Ghaliba illallah. La Ghaliba illallah. That dominance is only for Allah. Where were those people who wrote this? See, it remained on the wall, but it was removed out of the heart. And to a great degree, that the Alhambra Palace, it embodies the decline of the Muslims. And the mud hut in which Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu lived embodies the spirit of Islam. And when the Christians, they came in to the Alhambra Palace, they found the highest place that they could, and they erected a crucifix. And when Abu Muhammad saw this, he began to cry. And his mother said, why are you crying like a woman when you couldn't defend it like a man? Why are you crying like a woman when you couldn't defend it like a man? And this is our state today, really. We whinge about everything. We whinge about everything. You know, the Jews are to blame, the Christians are to blame, the Americans are to blame, the Israelis are to blame. But one person who's not to blame is me and you. You know, we're not to blame. And really we want to revolutionize the world through our talks and through, you know, chatting. But we can't wake up for the Fajr Salah. We can't change ourselves and we want to revolutionize the world. How do you expect the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to come? How do you expect the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to come when the youngsters can't spend an hour, 2 hours a week to learn their deed? How do you expect the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to come where our areas, where our mothers and our sisters who go through their whole life and they don't even know the farz of ghusl, they don't know even the farz of when you have intercourse, how you should bathe. How are you going to expect the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to descend upon us? You know, they go through their lives. They go through their lives, their mothers, their sisters, they cook for their children. And all through their life they go. And they go in a nafaq state, in an impure state. And the day they die and they are given a bath, that's the only time they become pure. And we expect the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to descend. Really? How many people, and now let me ask you, how many people, analyze yourself, me and you, how many people spend an hour a day for the sake of these, besides your farz? Are we made for this dunya? Were me and you made for this dunya? If me and you were made for this dunya, then it's fine. Then it's not a problem. But the dunya is not our abode. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ said, go to the graveyards and visit the graveyards because it will remind you of death. Really, once a week you should go to the graveyards and you should look all those guys who were stronger than you, who had more wealth than you, who were more articulate than you. That's where they are today. That's where they are today because the dunya is not our abode. And the man is deluded. Look at the Prophet ﷺ. When he left this dunya, he wanted to show example. And 7 dirhams he had in his possession. And he gave those last 7 dirhams because he wanted to show his ummah that this dunya is not your abode. And therefore, if you will work for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will reward you. And the other approach, this is the first approach that we can have, you know, the lackadaisical approach, where we sit around, where our dawah is not proactive. The second approach is that the approach that Musa alayhi salatu wasalam had, the mosaic approach, where he would go to Fir'aun again and again. Who was Fir'aun? Fir'aun was a man who regarded himself as Allah. He said, Ana Rabbukum al-Ala, I am your highest Lord. But still Allah commanded Musa alayhi salatu wasalam to go to Fir'aun. And Allah knew that Fir'aun would never take him on. But he wanted to show the people to come after you that no matter how big a tyrant that person is, your duty is to call, and guidance is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if there's any people who should understand this, it's the Muslims. Because after the Prophet ﷺ, there is no prophet to come. The duty of calling is upon us. It's upon our shoulders. And if you call for the sake of Allah, Allah will reward you. But understand the natural consequences of dawah and calling towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will test you. And if you go back to the story of Musa and Fir'aun, the most beloved person to Fir'aun was who? It was Asiya, his wife. She was so beloved to him that when she asked him to take Musa alayhi salatu salam in the home, into the palace, he knew that this may be the very child that he's looking for. But because of his love for Asiya, he brought him into the house. He brought him into the palace and he grew up in the palace. And then when the same Fir'aun found out that his beloved wife Asiya had become a Muslim, what did he do? The narration mentioned that he tied her to the pillars and he began to knock huge nails into her legs and her arms. And he would say, even renounce your religion now and I will still forgive you. And she would say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And then he would knock another nail. And he would say, renounce your religion, I will forgive you. And she would say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And when he knew that he couldn't break her resolve, then he told his men to bring a huge rock. And when she saw that the rock was coming, she made a dua which Allah records in the Quran, which will be recited to the final day. What's the dua? She said, Rabbi ibni li indaka baytan fil jannah. She said, oh Allah, make me a house in Jannah. Where? Next to you. Allah, make a house next to you in Jannah and save me from Fir'aun. and his evil actions, and from the Qawm al-Zalimeen, from the oppressive nation. And the narrations mention that before the rock fell upon her, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala extracted her ruh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala